Are you looking to take your recovery game to the next level to help you in between your training sessions? This is going to be the video for you. Let's get to it. Hey, I'm Brandon Splay here from Thirst Gym, and I want to help you optimize your recovery because this is an issue I see with all the athletes that I work with and majority of the lifters that I work with. It's one thing to go into the gym and train hard, that couple hours a week that you're putting in, an hour, maybe an hour 15 in the actual weight room or doing your sport practice. All those things are great to make you better. But a lot of times it's the other 23 hours of the day of what you're doing that's going to help enhance your recovery so that you can recover from those training sessions and be able to see those progresses stack over time, accelerating your gains and your progress. I work with a lot of youth athletes and I see this issue a lot, and I harp on my athletes all the time about sleep, nutrition, getting enough protein, all those great things. So if you're looking at ways to hack into that, improve that, and see how this can improve your performance, this is going to be the video for you. So let's get started. All right, when it comes to recovery, I've got a hierarchy here, which is going to help you determine on where you should probably put majority of your time if you're trying to see the biggest returns on your investment, and kind of how most people flip this model upside down. Okay, so regardless of whether you just do strength training just because you enjoy training, you compete in powerlifting or bodybuilding or strength sports, or you're an athlete, this is not going to change. Okay, so to maximize your recovery, the key thing here, number one to focus on, is going to be your sleep. And I got some rough estimates here in terms of percentage, in terms of importance. They obviously are just rough estimates on my end, but from what we can tell from research and what's important, this is how you're going to want to lay things out. So sleep is going to be number one, all right? And ideally, you're going to want to have 7 to 9 hours each night. Now, I can tell you right now, I struggle with this being a business owner and being a father. This is where I can see the most improvement myself as well. But majority of your growth and tissue progress is going to happen while you're sleeping, okay? For younger athletes, I recommend trying to get on the higher end of closer to 9, maybe even 10 hours, right? Especially during non-school times in the summer or during breaks or on weekends. Maximize that rest as much as you possibly can because your responsibilities are much lower than a working adult. If you are a working adult, chances are you're probably gonna have to be on the lower end of the spectrum to kind of get things to work, especially if you have kids and other responsibilities, but still try to aim for a solid 7 hours per night. If you happen to drop into that 6 hours, some people can still see some pretty good progress at that, but I'll tell you what, research shows consistently that 7 to 9 hours is the sweet spot for your sleep. Number two is going to be focusing on your nutrition. And this is the big thing that I kind of harp on with my athletes and where they leave the most gains on the table. Usually their sleep is not as much of a problem. They usually can get that 7 to 8 hours. I'd like to see more, but the nutrition is where they really lack. And it's where a lot of people don't think about, I'm just gonna go start working out. I'm gonna try to eat healthy. Okay, well that sounds great, but we need an objective measure of what that is. So from a nutrition standpoint, I think it's gonna make up about 25% of your recovery process, right? You gotta give your body the fuel and the sustenance and the resources to actually be able to build tissue, recover, and actually feel good, right? So if you don't eat very well, even if you get enough sleep, if you're not giving your body the fuel to be able to build muscle and recover, you're not going to be able to optimize that. And the big one here that obviously people want to try to focus on here, especially if you're in the weight room, is going to be the protein side, right? Now, you still need carbs and fats. Those are all incredibly important as well. When it comes to building tissue, protein is the most important, and where most athletes, especially female youth athletes, miss the boat is not getting enough protein. We'll go into more details on this later. Next, I have as approximately 10% is your stress or your stress management, okay? We all do busy things in life and, different life factors with relationships and kids and, what kind of work environment you're in and your physical stress, right? That all comes into factor. And so that makes up about 10%. So the biggest thing you want to think about here is how can I just let my body relax and quote unquote be, okay? Being able to take a big breath in, breath out, let go what needs to be let go, have ways to relieve your stress through proper stress management. That could be through a counselor or a therapist, a significant other, a friend, somebody that you can talk to. Physical activity is a great way for many people to relieve some stress, getting out in nature. Lots of different ways you can do this, but find a stress management tool that works for you, that one, when you are stressed, you can back up to and use when you need it. And then lastly is going to be active recovery, which I have is about 5%. These are going to be things that are going to accelerate your workouts, okay? As it implies, you're going to be active. So that might be like going for walks or things like that. Again, it can help, right? I'm not going to tell you not to do it, but the return on investment is much lower than the things that we have up here at the top. So I also have an extra category. This is what other people try to find things to do that they major in the minor. We talk about they go crazy on the supplement train, or they go crazy into the cold bath tubs, or they try to do the grounding stuff and whatever. They're trying to put this stuff first before focusing on these big four things. Again, not saying some of these extra things can't be beneficial. Definitely not going to say they can't be. They can certainly help. I like doing some of those things myself as well, but they're never going to replace what's most important at the top, which is sleep and nutrition, for sure the most, and then focusing on your stress and your active recovery. All right, so now let's dive in a little bit more into sleep and what you can kind of do here and the things that are important to maximize your sleep, okay? We've already talked about the 7 to 9 hours. That's what you're gonna wanna try to aim for every night. Again, if you happen to be on the less side, if you can kind of try to make up for it later in the week, that can help, but it's not going to necessarily be a fix. Getting 7 hours consistently is going to be much better than getting 2 nights of 9 hours and 5 nights of 6 hours, okay? We want to try to make sure that we're pretty consistent with how much sleep that we get and always aiming for as much as you possibly can. Power naps are another hack that you can do if you're able to squeeze in a nap for 30 to 60 minutes. That can also help throughout the day. Next thing we want to understand is that 70% of your growth hormone is released while you're sleeping. So this is important when it comes to tissue repair and recovery. That's why sleep is so important, because that's when we get the majority of that growth hormone release into our body to be able to repair all the stuff that we do from our hard training. Third is being consistent. And by consistent, all the time, I'm just being consistent with your hours, but a consistent go to bed time and wake up time. The more consistent you are, you build your body into a rhythm, and your body naturally adjusts to that, right? You build these rhythms and these routines, and that's good quality, quote unquote, sleep hygiene. And that's going to, one, help you wind down a little bit better. It's gonna help you fall asleep faster. It's gonna make getting up easier. It's gonna make the whole process more consistent on your body versus if you're up super late one night and you're up super early in the morning the next day. That can, not necessarily be awful if you can get the amount of sleep, but being consistent will help make sure that that sleep is consistent and their body is gonna feel much better more consistently. Next is you wanna focus on your room being cool and dark, ideally aiming for 65 to 68 degrees in the temperatures you sleep in. Now, by cool and dark, I'm talking about, again, the temperature here, but if you like your house a little bit warmer, then you wanna sleep with less clothes on ideally. Or if you like your house a little bit colder, you may wanna keep some blankets there and try to be able to auto-regulate your temperature a little bit. But the goal here is you wanna make sure you're not too hot and you're not super freezing cold. There is a nice sweet spot range here according to research. And then you also wanna make sure that it's dark. So blackout curtains are a fantastic investment. I highly recommend them. I love them in my room. Makes the room as dark as possible. You want to make sure all the lights are turned off. If you have an alarm clock that's either completely faced away or facing a wall, it's on the dimmest setting that you can possibly have. If you can get away without one, even better, especially today with phones. You just put your phone on the nightstand and not have any kind of lights at all. That's the most ideal. If that's going to be a struggle, then an eye mask is a good hack that you can use to be able to mimic that and still see that darkness and not have any kind of light coming into your eyes. Next is going to be focusing on decreasing screens, and this is probably the biggest issue, especially for myself, is not being on your phone going to bed or while you're in bed, okay? That blue light that you're getting from the screen is going to make it harder for you to fall asleep. Research has consistently shown this. It's also going to decrease your melatonin output and your ability to actually get quality REM and deep sleep. So the more you can avoid screens going into bed, the better. We do live in a screen lifestyle, so it is going to be much harder than you think it is. But really, if you can do all your phone and your screen stuff and then go to get in the shower and then start to get your stuff ready for the day and then you go get into bed, you're probably around that hour point where you've kind of gotten rid of a lot of that. So the big thing here is just kind of keep your phone away from you as much as possible. And then lastly is focusing on your caffeine consumption, okay? I'm not against caffeine. Caffeine is a great performance enhancer. I drink coffee every single morning. The big thing here that you want to focus on is that your caffeine and your coffee or your energy drinks that you're having ideally is not coming after 2 p.m. in the afternoon, okay? Caffeine has about a 6 to 8 hour half-life. So whenever you ingest it, if we add 8 hours onto that, let's say 2 o'clock, it'll be completely out of your body around 10 p.m., okay? So if you're going to bed at 10 or 11, then that can probably be the last point that you can ingest it. And obviously, the more that you have, the longer you're gonna want that window to be, especially if you happen to be like a sipper or something like that. So usually for a safe bet, my recommendation for most people is try to get that caffeine all consumed before noon and then go on throughout your day. Many people train in the evening, right? 4, 5, 6 o'clock, and they have an energy drink when they walk into the gym at 4 or 5 o'clock. you have to think about that's not gonna be out of your system until well after midnight, right? So that could immediately, again, affect your deep sleep and your ability to fall asleep, irritability, feeling kind of fidgety, especially if there's other supplements that are in there, other ingredients that are designed to, prolong that caffeine release that does exist for some supplements that are out there. So just keep this in mind. Again, I'm not against caffeine. I had a big caffeine issue years ago when I opened my business, and it did definitely affect all my sleep and all that stuff. So I really try to make sure for myself, again, I follow that 2 p.m. room pretty consistently, unless if there happens to be a long day, but I know that I can go to bed later and get up later. I kind of make some wiggle room, so you can adjust this, and obviously this is off a person working a normal day. So just kind of adjust that caffeine consumption and just pay attention to it. And for the most part, also, if your caffeine consumption is over 300 milligrams a day, try to also just decrease the total amount of caffeine as well, and that will also improve your sleep quality, and it will make you feel better. The issue you're going to probably find, though, with the caffeine as I go into this recovery rant is that if you're used to having this before you train, right, then it becomes a habit, and that habit becomes hard to break. So finding caffeine-free options or decaf coffee, or finding things that have some like mental acuity but no actual caffeine are great substitutions. So they'll kind of give you that mental edge when you go in to train and do stuff, without having that massive caffeine dump in the evening before it comes time to sleep. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about here is going to be nutrition. And I've got some main points here that I really want to emphasize outside of just talking general nutrition information. Now, when it comes to protein, carbs, and fat and all that great stuff, I'm going to link some nutrition videos in the description box below that go into a much deeper dive of just the nutrition side, okay? So if you're looking for how much protein and carbs and fat I should have based on my body weight and all that stuff, that will be in that video. I'm not going to go into those weeds. This is just going to be talking about the recovery side of that nutrition. And so I talked about protein earlier, and so that's going to be point number 1 here, is that we want to make sure that we're getting enough protein. And for most people, that's going to be 0.8 to 1.0 grams per pound of body weight. That's a good range to aim for when it comes to getting your total protein intake. So for example, I'm approximately 150 pounds, so I aim for at least 150 grams of protein per day. That's what I aim for. It's a nice even number, easy to shoot for. If I'm a little under, not so bad. If I'm a little over, also not so bad, right? Just in that range, okay? Your carbs and fat then adjust depending upon how active you are, and what you kind of tolerate and what you kind of like. Again, I'm not too picky on that from a recovery standpoint. As long as you're getting quality fruits, vegetables, and healthy fats, and then carbohydrates like rice, potatoes, and oats, you're going to cover majority of your bases there. But the protein is where most athletes and people lack from the recovery side in particular. From a peri-workout perspective, though, what that means is what we're eating before, during, and after training. And some people will call this like the anabolic window and all that kind of stuff. I'm not really so concerned about that. What I'm after here is being able to optimize our performance and giving our body the resources to be able to not only perform well in the moment, but whenever that training is done, we're also providing those resources and making them readily available to kickstart that recovery process as soon as possible if we can, okay? And so pre-workout, so approximately 30 to 60 minutes before you work out, we want to make sure we have a little bit of carbohydrates, anywhere from 20 to maybe 40 grams of carbohydrates, to be able to give us enough energy to be able to train hard, okay? We are going to use carbohydrates as our primary fuel source when it comes to practices and lifting weights and doing strength conditioning stuff. We want to make sure that we have that glycogen, that glucose in our bloodstream readily available, so when we go to practice, we're not feeling tired, okay? It's not about topping off the muscle glycogen, it's about having that readily available right then and there. And then a little bit of protein, 10 to 20 grams will suffice, just so that there's amino acids going through your bloodstream, and again, they're readily available, so as that you're breaking down muscle tissue, it is there to be able to make sure it can kind of pull from those, okay? Your body still needs enough protein throughout the day, but having some in your bloodstream is incredibly important. And then the fat is somewhat optional in my opinion. You don't want to have a super high fatty meal, but you also don't want to have probably no fat at all. So for most people, something like a granola bar, a good quality granola bar, based very heavily in oats, not focusing on the candies and the chocolates and things like that. Just a good quality granola bar with maybe a little bit of fruit or nuts in it will suffice to be able to check majority of that, and then you can have a little bit of protein or a little bit of Greek yogurt, and you're going to be more than well enough to be able to go practice if you have that 60 minutes before you go do any kind of strength training or practice. The intra-workouts will be what you have while you work out. Now, you obviously are probably not going to be able to eat solid food, and you probably shouldn't if I was being honest. This is usually going to come in the form of liquid, and for most people, if you're a very high performer and you're burning a lot of calories, carbohydrates while you train, again, can help keep those glycogen levels somewhat topped off, if they're not already, or you can keep it in your bloodstream so again that glycogen, glucose in particular, is readily available, and then your body can store some more if it happens to need it. So I don't recommend this for everybody. If you are a high performer and you do a lot of work, or you live a very active lifestyle, construction or something like that, and you're constantly burning calories moving around, highly recommend some kind of carbohydrate source while you work out. If your workout is less than an hour, you can probably skip this step. Some people ask about amino acids. Me personally, I do like having a little bit of EAAs, essential amino acids, while I train. I got this from John Meadows. I personally do feel like I recover better when I have them versus when I don't. But again, personal preference, I'll let you make that decision. The research is kind of, you'll find some things supporting others not. If you're getting your total protein, probably not a big of a deal. You could probably save your money, and just anecdotal personal preference there. The post-workout is what you do after you get your strength training or your practice work done. And so from a sport athlete perspective, if you're going to actually doing your practice, you want to make sure, again, that you're having 20 to 30 grams of protein. So again, that the amino acids are immediately there to be able to recover the muscle tissue. And then you want to focus on quite a bit of carbohydrates here. Anywhere from 30 to 60 grams is going to be a sweet spot for most people. Again, making sure that you can get some more glycogen back into your muscle cells, top those off so that if you happen to have something later, again, you've already kind of refilled that water bottle back up, so to speak, but also you can continue to do your other daily life stuff. If you happen to have not as strenuous strength training, then obviously you can adjust that maybe more towards that lower end. You'll kind of dictate upon your activity level, but you do want to make sure that that's there. And then ideally your fat content is on the lower side. That way your body can absorb that as quickly as possible, and then be able to, again, not be hindered, because fat will slow down digestion. In general, that's a good thing, but post-workout, not exactly ideal. Next thing we want to focus on is hydration, getting enough water, okay? Many athletes are not focusing on drinking enough water. We want to make sure that we constantly have a water bottle on hand with us everywhere that we go. So if we even begin to feel like we're thirsty, we can get a good quality drink. For most people and most athletes, I recommend just aim for a gallon of water a day. It's an easy, simple thing to do. For most water bottles, it makes it pretty easy to track of how many times you need to fill it up, because they're usually a nice, good denominations of 16 ounces or 32 ounces. And then you can extrapolate out from there how many of those you need to drink throughout the day. Obviously, you may need more, you may need a little less, but it's just a good round number to shoot for. And you also want to make sure that hydration, you're getting ample of that hydration before you go to practice and lift, while you're practicing and lifting, and after you're hydration and lifting, because decreased hydration immediately impacts performance. We know this. So making sure that you're hydrated is incredibly important from just that performance side, but also making sure that when you are hydrated, you're going to recover better, and that water, your muscles or everything are built with a lot of water, or contain a lot of water from a cellular perspective. So we want to make sure that we have that, because if, again, you're dehydrated, you're not going to perform well, you're not going to recover well. Part two of that is then focusing on salt. Now, most athletes that I talk to, not only are they usually stinking in the protein side, they might do a pretty good job of drinking water, but their salt intake really sucks. Especially if you play outside in a sport, or you're doing things where you sweat a lot, you lose a lot more salt than you think you do. And I'm a big fan of Element. I take one every single day myself. I do feel a difference when I have it in terms of just my mood and my workouts. Everything feels so much better because I'm properly hydrated with the proper electrolytes. So I can make this electrolytes, but I like to focus particularly on salt because, again, most people underestimate the value of salt when it comes to training. And so the salt pulls water with it. So if you are hydrated but not enough salt, your body will just excrete that water because it has no reason to hold on to it. But if you have enough salt, you will optimize the water that you're drinking. You probably will actually feel more hydrated. Now, if you have too much salt and not enough water, that's when you get that really nasty, bloaty feeling, okay? So you can kind of figure out how to balance this over time. For most people, if you're putting some little salty things condiment-wise, or a food is naturally higher in sodium, you're gonna probably be okay. But I still like to have athletes focus on the salt, especially, again, if you're outside a lot and you do sweat a lot, you do practice a lot, multiple practices. Highly underrated for many athletes. And the last thing I want to talk about here is alcohol, okay? Obviously, if you're under 21, you shouldn't be drinking at all, right? But alcohol does affect your recovery. We know this. This is not ideal. Again, I like to have my occasional bourbon and drink, absolutely. But I'm also making sure I'm not drinking on a nightly thing. I'm not going out and getting tanked all the time, because that significantly hinders your sleep and your recovery process. making it harder to make progress. So most college people that I know that get into strength training or whatever go out Friday, Saturday nights and get absolutely shit-faced, and then they train hard Monday through Thursday, and they don't make a whole lot of progress. Again, I'm not going to blame just the alcohol, but it's certainly not helping your case. So use alcohol sparingly, use it in social settings if you're celebrating something, but outside of that, the more you can avoid alcohol, the better you're going to recover and the better you're going to feel. All right, the next thing we got to talk about here is stress, okay? Now, when it comes to stress, we're talking about negative stress, okay? Training is stress. There's positive stress, like euphoria stress, right? There's several different ways that you're going to feel stress. Life, kids, job, relationships, training, lack of sleep, okay? All those will affect that. So doing the nutrition and sleep stuff can immediately almost usually help your stress to some degree. However, I want to talk about how you can manage this and what stress really is. So what happens generally is when you are stressed, your body essentially goes through this like fight or flight system, okay? Not so much anymore, but our body was designed, if we see danger, we heighten ourselves from a stress perspective so that we can either defend ourselves or get away. That's evolutionary of kind of how stress has impacted our lives, okay? Back then, they were worried about getting food and being able to run away from animals, right? They weren't worried necessarily about the actual like, oh, I gotta get to work on time, right? So without going on too much of a tangent here, stress immediately impacts your cortisol. So the more that you're stressed, your cortisol levels will begin to increase. Cortisol is not good when it comes to recovery because it usually is going to hinder your testosterone levels, your sleep, your growth hormone, and your ability to recover, okay? Your body does not like cortisol in super high amounts or being elevated all the time. You are going to have increased cortisol during certain times of the day. That's natural and normal. The problem with high cortisol is when it's high all the time and you don't get it to come down. That's when it starts to snowball and leading to bad effects in terms of like weight gain, loss of appetite, really crummy sleep, ruminating thoughts. Those are all negative things of high cortisol outside of any kind of other health markers that might be tanking, your blood pressure, your heart rate. Those things also get affected, okay? There's more than just a performance and recovery side here. There's a general health issue when it comes to high cortisol. This is a big issue today in the 21st century is everybody is super stressed, running on fumes, and their cortisol is constantly high. That's why exercise works for a lot of people because while it does necessarily increase cortisol a little bit, it lets them relieve that stress and then that ends up decreasing their cortisol over time. So the more that you can manage your cortisol, the better your stress management is basically showing you. This is a good blood marker, and so I recommend getting your blood work done to see where your cortisol is at and trying to track that over time. When your stress is really high, I talked about how your sleep can also be bad. So this goes back to the most important thing is getting enough sleep. This gets to be a vicious cycle, and you can see how many people that are incredibly stressed with low sleep, and it just continues to feed the cycle over and over and over, and it's really hard to break. So sometimes stress management can help your sleep, and then you get that snowball going in the right direction. So yes, try to get as much sleep as you possibly can, but if you are really stressed, that can hinder your sleep. So sometimes you may have to focus on your stress management to get your sleep going in the right direction so you can fall asleep a little bit better and you don't wake up in the middle of the night, right? So just understand that these things are very kind of highly intertwined and you kind of have to work with them together, but you got to kind of go after what's most important and what's truly affecting, okay? Next is going to be breathing, okay? When it comes to stress management, good quality breathing, like actually relaxing breathing, has been shown to get your body to tone down, okay, and relax and veg out. And that's going to naturally get your vagus nerve to relax. When your vagus nerve is relaxed, you will see your stress go down and you will feel more relaxed, and that will obviously then help your cortisol. A good breathing thing that you can do at home is the 4-7-8 method, okay? So what this means is you're gonna breathe in for 4 seconds, in through your nose, okay? The 7, you're gonna try to hold it for approximately 7 seconds. So breathe in, hold for that 7 seconds, and after you're done, exhale for 8 seconds, okay? If you do this 5 times, especially if you go before your bed, you will feel tremendously more relaxed. But if you are in a stressful situation, you've had a long day at work, you go out to the car, you get ready to go home, sit in your car and do a couple of these breaths and just relax and be, okay? Don't turn the music on, don't do anything like that. Literally just breathe and relax. This helps many people. If you get in the habit of doing this more frequently, it's going to help your stress management, I promise you. Breathing is huge. It's helped me personally with a lot of my personal stress. the CARX thing is exactly what I do, okay? So take your breathing. You can also do this after your training as well if you really want to, just again, try to tone down and kind of kickstart that parasympathetic nervous system. Next is gonna be nature, okay? We spend way too much in time in society today, and getting out and connecting with nature, going on walks, hiking, doing stuff in the water, going to the beach is why so many people love the beach when it comes to going on vacation, right? Because technically they're interacting with nature. Yes, there's all the nice fancy buildings and nightlife and all that kind of stuff that goes on, but being able to connect with the ground and the water and the sounds and the animals, not having technology inside in terms of like your phone, worrying about work and all those other responsibilities actually truly lets you relax. So the more that you can get out in nature and enjoy that, I assure you, you will find that your stress will decrease, okay? It's naturally going to happen. It's kind of, almost evolutionary to an extent. So get outside more if you can. During the winter months, obviously much harder to do. So just find, again, other ways to do that. Some people do like to still go outside and do stuff in the snow and the cold. You can still do that. I'm not gonna fault you on that, but it's much easier to get outside when the weather's nice, right? And the last thing I want to talk about here is going to be your sex and your relationships, okay? Many people's stress revolves strictly around relationships, and whether that be with your significant other or somebody that you're dating or even a friendship and that happens to go south, right? That causes a lot of undue stress. So the better that you can manage your relationships, being understanding, working on communications, focusing on positive relationships, right? If there's, I hate to use the word toxic, I'm not a big fan of that word, but if there's negative people in your life, disassociating with those people, doing bad things that are, not conducive to your lifestyle, that will immediately also reduce your stress. But then I also like to talk about sex because that is important in terms of connecting with people, okay? Regardless of whether your sexual orientation, I'm not going to discuss that here in this video, but having a quality sex life is going to make you a happier person, okay? I've never met anybody that has a good quality sex life that's not a happy person, okay? So again, if you're able to focus on this, please do, because it will, again, help all the rest of this stuff. Clearly, if you are not in a relationship with somebody and you're not sexually active, then I understand that there can be some different issues there. But again, making sure that you're staying away from other sexual things can still be beneficial as well. And so I think it's something that's not talked about enough when it comes to stress management, because so many people's stress revolve around this big thing here. And if you can kind of take care of this, it makes it easier to kind of take care of some of these other things. I'm not saying you can't focus on these, because you still should, but this one to me, I'm very passionate about, and I think it will improve a lot of people's lives. So that's how you can immediately improve your stress, that it actually then go on to improve your recovery. All right, the last thing we gotta talk about here is active recovery, okay? And again, this is that very small amount that can give some beneficial gains, but again, should not be where you're putting all your efforts. So I am very big into active recovery, especially if you're an athlete. I think it's also untapped potential that many people somewhat initially think about for some things, but also overlook as a good, easy way to immediately feel better. And the most common one, right, that I think that most people should be doing more frequently is just going on walks, okay? Being active, as it says, active is important. If you are sedentary, you have a sedentary job and you just go to the gym to lift, there's nothing wrong with that. You're doing good quality exercise. But going on walks, getting your step counts up, maybe even focusing on some zone 2 cardio because you're not doing anything cardiovascular wise, does help your recovery, okay? If you have a lower heart rate and your blood pressure is in a better position, you will recover better. But you can only do that by doing cardiovascular exercise of some degree. But walking is also a great way, again, talking about going about with nature and stress management is a great way to help manage that stress. So you can kind of get a 2-for-1 there. You can also spend time with a significant other or a dog, when you go walking, that's also going to be more connective. You can kind of double down on some things here. So I think walking, again, to me is the easy one to go for here when it comes to active recovery. Number 2 is going to be yoga, okay? I clearly do not look like I do yoga. I have done it sometimes with my wife at home, especially during the whole COVID thing, and it does work, okay? It focuses, again, when it comes back to stress management, good quality breathing. We're going to attach into some of this next one, which would be stretching, actually getting the body moving through new ranges of motion. Usually there's a meditation piece aspect of it, of kind of focusing on, how you feel and where your body's in space. It's usually quiet. Yoga has done people a lot of good. And you can hate on yoga all you want, but when it comes to active recovery, I do think it's a very undervalued thing if you happen to be into that. We do know that yogis generally look like they're pretty stress-free, and I think that's a good sign. So let's take a page out of their book and use that to help your active recovery if you so need to. Next would be stretching and foam rolling. Okay, this is what most people think about when they think about recovery is what can I stretch, what can I foam roll, get the muscles feeling good. Not against that. So again, if you have the downtime, you have a foam roller at home, you're feeling a little bit tight here in certain places, you want to get some extra stretching before you go to bed, it does help you generally kind of tone down and wind down before bed. I usually do some stretches before bed to try to help with my hips and my back, and I do feel better when I go to bed and when I wake up. So again, another good way to get some good quality active movement in to accelerate that recovery process. And then going through a massage. Now, this isn't active per se that you're doing the work, somebody else is doing the work for you, okay? Now, this could be lumped underneath that extra thing, but I think massaging is basically having somebody else do the stretching and soft tissue work for you. And anytime that I've had massages, for most people that I've ever talked to that have also had massages, one, you are completely relaxed, right? They play that soothing music, right? There's no talking, you're not connecting with any kind of technology or screens. Your body is completely relaxed. Somebody else is kind of working on your tissues, making sure that you feel more relaxed. And that 30 to 60 minutes for a lot of people, if you do that, you know, on a consistent basis, not all the time, but like say once a month or whatever, that is a good way to just let your body tone down and kind of relax, reward yourself, get new blood flow to tissues and things of that nature, and can accelerate that recovery process. So when I competed in powerlifting, I did massages basically once a training cycle, so about every 12 weeks. If I would have had more money, I probably would have done it more, if I'm being honest. But I do love massages. I think they are fantastic. If you've never done a massage, I think once you do one, you'll kind of see the benefits from them and kind of how you're really feeling. Like I talked about, it kind of stacks with some of those other recovery things that we talked about. So there's other things that do qualify here, absolutely. But these are kind of the big ones that most people can usually immediately access and benefit from to improve their performance. All right, the last thing we're talking about are going to be those extra things we talked about where you could be steep in the potential benefits, but you're probably putting too much effort into them rather than the other stuff that actually we know for sure is going to immediately give you dividends that you can see progress from. So the first one's going to be saunas. I do like saunas. I kind of have a negative association with saunas with myself from all my cutting weight in terms of wrestling and in powerlifting. But saunas, a good short burst, 10 to 20 minutes, many people feel relaxed and feel much better. So, you know, if you have access to one at your gym, then obviously use it, right? If you have the time and the ability to get in it 1 to 2 times a week after your training sessions, certainly by all means use it, especially if you absolutely love it. But trying to hunt down a sauna just to get extra recovery, in my opinion, is probably a waste of time if you're not doing all the other things that we talked about earlier. Same thing kind of goes with the cold tub. Now, the cold tub, for me, I'm not big on it in terms of decreasing inflammation and doing things after you work out. I think that is not a good idea. I kind of talked about this on social media personally, that if you do a lot of running, we want to be able to recover from that. And cold restricts blood flow, especially from the extremities, right? It makes your blood pool more towards the center of your body, keep your organs warm, doing all other things. It's not going to worry as much about the extremities. So you're not going to get good quality blood flow there. However, the cold tub has been shown, especially in the mornings, in terms of like waking you up, and some of the health benefits there seem to be very, very positive, especially when it's super far out from your training session. So this has become very popular lately, and I think it's incredibly overhyped because too many people should be focusing more on their sleep and their nutrition rather than going for a cold tub to improve their recovery and how they feel. Now, the reason the cold tub is so popular is because that good feeling that you get when you get out 10 minutes afterwards is amazing. And it's immediately tangible, and people like that. We're in an instant gratification world, and this gives you that instant gratification. Getting enough sleep and eating the right food and focusing on hydration and stress management don't give you that immediate instant gratification. And so you have to stack those days over time. Now, once you feel those positive benefits, you're like, man, I'm feeling a lot better. But that's why the cold tubs become more important. So again, I'm not anti-cold tub. I think too many people just put this well before what's truly important. And the other one is going to be contrast showers, okay? This is something that I think is probably better than these two for the average person because it's more accessible, right? Chances are if you're watching this video, you have access to a shower. And so with contrast showers, while you normally take your normal shower, you know, do your normal thing to get clean and be hygienic, but you can also go back and forth between incredibly hot and incredibly cold, right? And do that for about 60 seconds a piece, and that's going to create a flushing effect. And that flushing effect is going to move blood throughout the body much more effectively. So because you're already probably taking a shower, chances are this is gonna be a good cheat code in very minimal time, and it's gonna give you some of these similar benefits without having to hunt down or purchase a cold tub or try to find a sauna. So again, you don't want to put all your eggs on doing contrast showers, but if you are doing some of those other things and you can say, hey, I can get an extra 5 minutes of shower a couple times a week by doing those, then I think it's not a bad thing. I did it a lot whenever I powerlifted because it did make my joints and everything feel better. But guess what? I was also focusing more on my sleep and my hydration and my nutrition. And so that's why I probably saw a better benefit from that. So again, these are things that do work. I don't think they're bad, but I think if you're putting these before the things we talked about, you're really missing the boat when it comes to improving your recovery. All right, so to wrap up this video, what can you do, right? How can you immediately improve your recovery, okay? Here's what I would recommend for you to try to instill in your lifestyle. Set a bedtime, set a wake up time, and stay as consistent to that as much as you possibly can, okay? That's going to be building a routine right off the get-go. The next thing from that sleep perspective is then figure out how you can get 30 minutes more sleep a day, okay? Whether that's going to bed 30 minutes earlier or being able to get up 30 minutes later. Most people probably not realistic, so it's probably trying to go to bed earlier, which is why people have issues. Or maybe you split the difference. Maybe you can go to bed 20 minutes earlier and sleep in an extra 10 minutes by preparing everything at night, getting everything ready so that you save yourself 10 minutes in the morning of getting ready, right? You've got your coffee on automatic. You've got your brunch or your shake in the morning packed and ready to go. Your lunch is ready to go. Your clothes are set out. You showered the night before, so you just got to wake up, brush your teeth, get dressed, grab your coffee and stuff, and walk out the door, okay? I know that's very simple, but you can see how quickly you can speed things up if you're prepared, okay? The other thing is when you immediately wake up, okay, get a nice big glass of water, 8 to 12, 16 ounces, and down that bad boy to immediately get the hydration process started. You also add some salt to that as well, if you are looking for a way to add salt into your diet relatively quickly. On the nutrition side, pack and plan your meals as much as you can. I'm not going to tell you have to go all full-on bodybuilder style, but if you have a meal prep day throughout your week where you can prepare a lot of healthy meals, that's going to set you up for success on the nutrition side. When it comes to your workouts, again, make sure that you have something prepared. If you're coming from work and going to the gym, or you're on the way, you have something that you can snack on before you get there. Make sure you're staying hydrated while you work out, and then have something after you work out. Ideally, whether it be a protein shake or you're immediately going home to eat a solid food, and that meal is going to be ready in a short period amount of time. And then find a way to do something throughout the day that can let you decompress and relax. So I talked about how I personally like to just sit in my car and do that 4-7-8 method, or just breathe and relax, okay? You can do that before you walk into work. As soon as you get into work, do that. You can do it as soon as you get out of work, before you go into the gym, right? You can do it in bed before you go to sleep. Find a way to breathe and relax and truly veg out. Also, find a way to disconnect yourself from some technology throughout the point of the day. So me personally, what I try to do 2 to 3 times per week when I'm driving to work in the morning, I make sure I have no music on, okay? I just listen to the sounds, what's going on through the car, you know, all that kind of stuff. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it actually makes you kind of sit and stew in your own thoughts a little bit. And it's almost a form of meditation, okay? So find a way to do something like that lets you disconnect from that. And then, you know, spend less time on social media and on your phone, okay? It sounds ridiculous, but I assure you, if you can do that, you will be less stressed and you will feel a lot better because you won't be comparing yourself to others. And that will then have long-term dividends. I'm not gonna tell you to get off social media entirely, but I assure you, if you can decrease your screen time 30 to 60 minutes a day, you will feel a lot better because of having done that. So those are some simple steps that I recommend that will immediately impact your life, make you feel better, improve your recovery. You'll see the dividends when it comes to your performance and your strength and conditioning based work and your actual lifting for sure. So those are all things that I've used to help myself. Okay, I'm giving you firsthand experience of things that I have done that I like. I am a very busy individual, and I try to find quote unquote hacks as much as I can, as well as focusing on those other things. How can I optimize and put things together with the small periods amounts of time that I have? So that's my suggestion for you for real world first person experience. If you happen to enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate if you hit that like button. Leave me a comment. Let me know what recovery method helped you, what tip that I gave you something that you can immediately use, because I'd love to hear how that helps you out here. And as always, if you really enjoyed the video, share with a friend that can benefit from this. That also really helps me out. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you at the next video.